something I really, I know I had the lesson this week. I really couldn't come up with anything. But this is something that, like, I don't know, I just get really passionate about. And it has to deal with, you know, us as people. The race of humanity is not meant to be perfect. And I feel like sometimes that people see Christianity as, like, all these people who think they're, like, better than everybody else, which obviously is not true at all. So, and it's kind of going with how we all make mistakes, and it's okay, because, I mean, we're not supposed to be perfect. We were designed that way. So, I'm going to start out with, like, give me a list of, like, things that are considered, like, society sees them as, like, bad, or, like, if people do these things, they're probably, like, messed up, or don't say something like murder or anything, but you know what I mean.
Getting tattoos.
I disagree.
Tattoos everywhere.
Write it down, he said it.
Face tattoos.
Okay, let's just say like drugs.
That's pretty much what I meant.
Do you have a list that you were just going to do before?
No, it's just like I wanted you guys to give me ideas based on, like, this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Illegal things.
Not necessarily.
We could just say simple like immorality. I meant like sexual immorality.
He's got some list.
Let's say like yeah, okay. Yeah.
How about lying? Does that count?
Yeah.
Lying.
Lying,
Gossip.
gossip.
Whatever play that is for a
I don't know, like bullying, I guess.
Oh, that's a good one.
Stuff like that. I mean, so obviously when, like, this stuff is really prevalent, especially in, like, the high school world. And I feel like, me personally, like, I've seen people going through this stuff, and even I've been through it myself too. And I feel like some people just feel like they're trapped, or I don't know, maybe because they did this stuff, they think they are, like, not worthy of anything. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to be honest, that stuff doesn't really define us, because we all make these mistakes, and nobody's exempt from making some kind of sin. And I feel like it's really easy for people to get discouraged with their faith because they do something that is natural. They make a mistake, something like that, or, you know, they maybe go to a party and make a mistake or something like that, and they just feel like, man, I can't do the whole Christian thing because who am I? Like, I don't think I'm really deserving, but that's not the truth. So if someone could read James 4:7, and then somebody read the classic John 3:16.
I'll read one of those.
James 4:7.
James chapter 4, verse 7.
Yeah.
Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw high to God, and he will draw high to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded.
That's good. And then, I guess, I mean, we all kind of know John 3:16. I feel like it's just for God gave His only Son to the world, and obviously, like, died on the cross. And those of us who believe in Him shall not perish and have eternal life. And that really, like, obviously, it's one of the most famous verses of all time. But even so, I mean, it still goes undervalued. I feel like, because think about it. Think of all the sin that was happening in the world. Jesus came. I mean, He was practically killed by His own people. But that stuff, I mean, it doesn't matter because all your sin is replenished. Like, it's gone. So you always have an escape from sin, and it's God. And that being said, obviously, you're going to sin your whole life, if that's just the way it is. I mean, obviously, God didn't want it to be that way with Adam and Eve, but it's the truth. And you're always saved. I mean, you can always be forgiven no matter what happens. I mean, you can see people in prison that they'll be praying or something, and just because they did something bad once doesn't necessarily mean they're like damned to hell forever. That's the best thing about this religion, in my opinion, is personally I don't believe that your worth is based on like good deeds to God. Obviously that helps, but God uses imperfect people all the time to really make a difference in this world. I mean, think about it. One of the most famous biblical figures, Old Testament, Moses. Everyone's like, oh, he's a prophet, one of the greatest people of all time. The truth was he was a murderer. I mean, think about it. I mean, he killed an Egyptian, and then he was like an outcast, and he was sentenced to, what was he, 40 years in the desert or something like that? He never came back. And then God used him. He also couldn't speak. He had a severe speech impediment. So he was not like this perfect guy that everyone like associates with him. But he was a good person. He had a good heart. And he believed in God, and he did what he felt was right. But just because he messed up once doesn't mean he was, he was done. He was done for. I mean, same thing with David. God loved David, but he had 100 wives, something like that. I mean, he even like killed one of his best friends. And I'm not saying this stuff to like discourage everyone and think that humanity has no hope, but the truth is we all sin, but God uses sinners. So, people like, even my own parents, because I wouldn't say I was really raised in a family that goes to church every weekend. Like, I would probably say that my faith is a little stronger than most people in my family. Like, I try to get them to go and stuff or talk about it, but my parents don't really like go to church, and my brother doesn't really ever go to church, and my sister's still young. And I kind of do stuff on myself, or sometimes we talk about, they believe in God, but they just don't necessarily like understand everything. But like, I remember Devin, one of the first lessons he said, we don't have all the answers. That's okay. Because this religion is not meant to be, you do this, black and white, this, you do this, you're into heaven, all that. I think that's what makes it great. I mean, wouldn't you guys agree? So, I feel like we just need to understand that God made us the way we are, and that our walk with Him is something that it's a commitment for your whole life. I kind of compare it to like learning to ride a bicycle as a kid. You know what I mean? Because when first time you try to ride that bicycle, you get on the wheels and you immediately like fall down, scrape your knees, scrape your elbows, and I remember it sucks pretty bad. You don't want to do it. But you got to learn how to ride a bike, am I right? I mean, it's one of the childhood memories, riding around your neighborhood on your bike. But I remember my dad would always make me get back on the bike, and I would keep falling, and keep falling, but I kept doing it. And over time, as I kept doing it, eventually, I was like a pro. I mean, you could ride your bike and do tricks on it, go off some sweet jumps. I mean, think about it. Curve hops, I mean, whatever you want to say. You went from popping wheelies, I mean, you went from not being able to ride a bike and falling down all the time. And it was just, and after once you just kept your commitment to it, learning how to ride a bike, it was smooth. I mean, you felt like you could conquer the world. At least I did. So what I'm saying is, I compare that kind of to our relationship with Christ, and I feel like I can really relate to this because my faith is something I struggle with a lot, and I've always believed in God, and I've always wanted to attend church and wanted to attend stuff like FCA, but I always felt like I was, I was never quite there, but so as I was like making mistakes with, sitting in my house or sometimes thinking about, man, I was kind of mean to that person today, or man, I don't know, sometimes I just felt bad, but you can't get discouraged for the reasons I've already listed, because, I mean, your sin's already cleansed, and I'm not condoning, like, bad activity or anything. It's not like you can just go out and do whatever and say, oh, I'm forgiven, because obviously, we know that that's not a good path to walk down, but, just rejoice, because you're always good enough for God. You might never be good enough for some people, and you might feel inferior, but it doesn't matter because you always are good for. You're always good enough for God, no matter what you do. He will never turn you away. Just think about that. I mean, no matter how bad you mess up, you can never be turned away by God. He's always right there. He's a constant. He's a constant. So when you feel like you're making mistakes, or you know people that are making mistakes, like, don't get discouraged, or don't necessarily think if you've never had a problem really with any of this and somebody else does that you're better than them. Because we're all the same, but all different at the same time. We're all created by God. Meaning that everybody in this room, He loves. And no matter what you do, that will never be robbed from you. That's the one thing. No matter what you're going through, you always have God. So, I don't know. That's just what I kind of feel like. I feel like it kind of goes underlooked, especially in churches and stuff, that I feel like some people think there's this idea to Christianity that we have to live to a certain standard, and that if you don't, then like you can't achieve salvation. And that's not true at all, because we're all going to mess up. We're all going to fall off that bike. We're all going to scrape our knees a couple times. It's life. That's what makes life so great, though, is we have the ability to, when we mess up, to go to someone that is never gonna judge us, or never gonna, seek His wrath on us. So, I mean, just knowing that, waking up in the morning, know that whether you have an awesome day, you feel like a great person that day, or you feel like a horrible person, you made a big mistake, God's going to be there the next day no matter what. So I feel like that's just really comforting, especially in my life, because I feel like I'm a very flawed person, and I'm sure everyone in here knows, feels like they have their flaws, and it's just comforting. He's always there for us. So, especially when you walk with Christ, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to fall off that bike. Keep going, because we're not meant to be perfect, and that's what's so great about Christianity. I mean, do any of you guys have stories about how you felt like you were in you were struggling with something, and you just kind of feel like you needed something? You know what I mean? You needed that rock. Like Devin, do you have anything I'm sure you always have some great stories about it.
No, but I was going to say, I really like what you said, how even though we are forgiven, doesn't necessarily mean we can keep going back to what we've been doing. Even though God has love for us and we receive His grace, that doesn't mean that we just keep getting to live this sinful life, and then once we're done with our temptation, or once we're done with our sin, that we just go back to God and say, hey God, I messed up again, sorry, forgive me, and then just go back to doing the same thing next week. If we continue to lie to ourselves and just continue to live in this sin and these temptations, we kind of fool ourselves and kind of get the wrong impression of God's love for us. Because God doesn't want us to keep just living this sinful life and then asking for forgiveness for Him. He wants us to be in a relationship with Him every day. Because that's the kind of life that is going to give us true life. So I think it's just important to remember, it's awesome what Brooks has been saying, and God is always going to have forgiveness for us, and He's always going to have love for us, but at the same time, we don't want to keep returning to these things that really are just trying to kill us. So, yeah.
I think, kind of going on what Brooks said, is that with me, especially when I struggle during the day, or I just have a crappy day, and I want to read my Bible at night, I want to do something, but I feel like, what's the point? I was a completely horrible person that day. I feel like a hypocrite. And what helps me, kind of get through those times is to realize that when you ask for forgiveness, God completely wipes your slate clean, and that He truly completely forgets about what you did. And I say that because in Psalms 103, this is the Message version, He says, He doesn't treat us as our sins deserve, nor pay us back in full for our wrongs. As high as heaven is over the earth, so strong His love to those who fear Him. And as far as the sun rises from the sunset, He has separated us from our sins. So He said that after you ask for forgiveness, that He completely, your sins as far as the sunset is, it's as far as the east is from the west, and that He completely forgives and forgets about what you did. So, and that aspect of what Brooks is talking about, that it's very comforting to me to remember that, and to that He will, He still accepts you and He still loves you and all that things, and that you can go pursuing Him even after, you've had a crappy day.
Especially, I feel like we can take this outside of this room, especially because, I don't know, we all have friends that might necessarily not be, they might believe in God, but they don't really really understand anything, or they don't know what it means to pursue Christ. And I feel like if you have a friend that, let's say, I don't know, maybe they're struggling with this kind of stuff, and they know it's really tearing them down, and it's something that's really getting to them in a negative way, man, just try to put yourself in his shoes and just be a light for him. Just say, and I've heard this before, and somebody will say man, I want to do the whole church thing, and I want to believe in God, and I want to strengthen my relationship, but I don't even know where to begin to start, because I just feel like I wouldn't fit in with the people that go to church, because they're all perfect and great people, and I'm just me. And you just have to look at them and just share this wisdom that hey, God's always there for you. You always have a light, and no matter what you do, you're forgiven. And you can really strengthen yourself as a person just by knowing that we're imperfect, we're flawed, and everybody has their weaknesses, and everybody's going to sin on the daily. Either it's like Mitchell said. Mitchell is one of the strongest people I know in his faith, and he'll admit that he has days where he feels like he's just horrible day. He felt like he was a horrible person, and that's because we're made to be imperfect, and that stuff happens. So just trying to shed a light to that person to tell him, hey, you'll fit in just fine, because we're all going through similar things. Some of us obviously have more struggles than others, but at the end of the day, we're all going to go through hardships. That's just life. I wish it wasn't that way. We all do. But that's just the fact of the matter. So, just shed a light outside this room, that tell people that really don't understand that, hey, God's always there. It will get them wondering. It will get them kind of questioning. They might ask you some questions, and you can probably feel equipped to answer them. And, you never know that slight difference you can make in someone's life. So, just show them God's love. And we've talked about that before in this room, and I think it's really important to do that. Does anybody else have any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's cool that you did this message today, because last night I came across the verse, Ephesians 2, 8 through 9. It says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is a gift from God, not by your works, so that no one can boast." So this is saying, once you've accepted God into your heart, there's nothing you can do so He won't love you. Once you accept Him into your heart, you're saved. There's no deed you can do where He won't love you anymore. So it's pretty amazing how the grace God shows us, and we're saved through faith, not through anything we do.
Absolutely right. Anybody else? All right, I guess so we can